Human helps alien girl escape hunters, but human realizes the hunters were sent by her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Cole moved through the scorched tree line with the heat of the ground rising through his boots, the air still humming with static from whatever had torn this part of the forest apart. His visor flickered with low battery warnings, a thin buzz in his ear that matched the thump of his heartbeat. He didn't know who had sent out the distress beacon, only that it repeated every 10 seconds, soft, shaky, and undeniably frightened. He stepped over a cracked boulder and saw faint footprints pressed into the soot, too light to belong to a grown human, too precise to be wildlife. Then he heard it, a tense breath drawn in too sharply. Someone trying to stay hidden. Ethan slowed his pace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low, the way you'd talk to someone cornered. A shadow shifted behind a fallen trunk. Then she revealed herself, a young alien woman with luminous turquoise skin that caught the dim light like polished stone. Her short dark hair was damp with sweat, her breathing uneven, her wide silver-flecked eyes darting past him into the trees. She wasn't holding a weapon. No threat posture. Just fear. "Hunters," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're close." Ethan scanned the tree line, seeing nothing but feeling everything. The pressure in the air, the quiet that didn't feel natural, the sense of being watched. He stepped closer to her, slow and careful. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she breathed. "Please, don't leave." Ethan reached out his hand, palm open. She hesitated, then placed her cool fingers against his. The moment contact was made, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "All right, Lyra," he murmured. "Let's get you out of here." They moved through the forest together, Ethan guiding her along the least exposed paths. Every few yards, she flinched at sounds he didn't hear, turning her head as if tracking movements too subtle for human senses. When a distant snap echoed from behind them, too clean to be a falling branch, Lyra gripped his arm with sudden urgency. "They're following," she whispered. "They won't stop." Ethan kept his expression steady even as unease chilled the back of his neck. "Then we'll outrun them." They reached a narrow ridge overlooking a dried creek bed, the wind lifting dust around their feet. Lyra stopped abruptly, her breath catching as if she'd glimpsed something Ethan couldn't see. Her voice trembled with a quiet truth she hadn't yet shared. "You don't understand," she said softly. "They're not just following me." She looked at him, eyes full of something deeper than fear. "They were sent because of me." The wind shifted across the ridge, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Ethan Cole pause. He kept his stance steady, one hand gently guiding Lyra forward as she tried to catch her breath. The dry creek bed below them was shallow, littered with sun-bleached stones that glittered under the late afternoon light. Lyra's confession still hung between them, quiet but heavy. Ethan studied her face for a moment, noting the tension in her jaw and the way her silver-flecked eyes kept scanning the ridge behind them. She was not lying. She was bracing. "Lyra," he said softly, "I need you to tell me what you meant. Why would anyone be sent because of you?" She looked away, her voice tight. "It is complicated. It always was." Ethan did not press her. Instead, he guided her down the ridge, boots sliding across loose gravel, keeping his body angled so she would not lose balance. The air was warmer at the bottom, the scent of dry sage brushing past them as they crossed the creek bed. A thin layer of dust clung to their clothes. Lyra stayed close, her steps light but uneven. After a few minutes, she finally spoke again, her tone quieter than before. "There are people who want information I carry. People who want to stop me from sharing it. They were told to find me and to bring me back." She hesitated. "I left without permission." Ethan processed that. There were 100 reasons someone might run from their own kind, but her trembling breath told him this was no ordinary family dispute. "You left because it was dangerous for you," Ethan guessed. She shook her head. "I left because it was dangerous for others." They reached a narrow path winding between tall stone outcroppings. The shadows here were deeper, cooler, the air vibrating faintly with echoes that made Ethan glance upward. Lyra lowered her voice. I tried to warn them, but they did not listen. So I ran. Ethan kept walking, guiding her toward the abandoned transit tunnel he had spotted earlier. Its entrance was half hidden behind a curtain of fallen vines, the concrete etched with old transit symbols faded by time. Safe enough for a pause. Inside, the tunnel walls held the coolness of night, and the faint smell of damp metal carried a strange comfort. Lyra leaned against the wall for support, drawing a slow breath. Ethan, she said, you should not be helping me. You do not know what I am. He gave her a tired half-smile. I know you needed help. Her expression wavered, surprised by the simplicity of it. She opened her mouth to speak again, but a soft ripple in the air made her freeze. Not a sound exactly, more like a shift. Ethan sensed it a moment later, a subtle vibration underfoot, like someone stepping lightly somewhere deeper in the tunnel. He raised a hand for silence, listening carefully. The faint hum settled, then faded. Just the infrastructure cooling, he told himself, though he was not fully convinced. Lyra touched his sleeve gently. If they are near, I will slow you down. You are not slowing me down, Ethan replied as he adjusted the strap on his pack. You are the reason I am moving. Her gaze softened, something grateful flickering through it. She straightened a little, steadying herself. Then we keep going, she whispered. Ethan nodded and led her deeper into the tunnel, the dim light catching on her turquoise skin, turning it to soft shades of blue. Whatever waited ahead, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He was not leaving her behind. The air inside the transit tunnel grew cooler as Ethan Cole and Lyra moved deeper, their footsteps soft against the concrete floor. A faint echo traveled ahead of them, not loud enough to alarm, but present enough that Ethan stayed alert. The dim emergency strips along the wall flickered with a low orange glow, barely enough to light the path but sufficient for his visor to adjust. Lyra kept close to his side, her turquoise skin reflecting small glints of the emergency lights, giving her an almost ethereal shimmer in the half-dark. She walked with more stability now, though Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she listened to the environment the same way he did. Ethan, she said quietly, there is something you should know before we continue. Her voice was calm, but her hands were clasped together with a nervous precision. He slowed his steps without stopping. Go ahead. She hesitated, then exhaled. The information I carry is not just sensitive. It is something my people refuse to acknowledge. I tried to warn them that a system they trusted was failing. Something is happening on a scale larger than they want to admit. Ethan looked ahead, scanning the faint glow at the far end of the tunnel. And you ran because telling the truth put a target on your back. She nodded. Yes, and it placed one on anyone who helps me. Ethan gave her a steady look. That is not going to change what I am doing. Lyra studied him, as if trying to understand a choice she would not have made in his position. They continued forward until the tunnel opened into a wider transit station long abandoned by the city. The ceilings stretched high above them, beams crossing overhead like ribs of a forgotten structure. Dust floated in the stale air, drifting lazily through beams of filtered sunlight coming from cracks in the ceiling. Old posters curled against the far wall, their colors faded beyond recognition. We can rest here, Ethan said, motioning toward a bench that looked stable enough. Lyra sat, smoothing her hands along the edge as though grounding herself. Ethan checked his small handheld scanner, watching the pale light ripple across its surface. No movement nearby, he murmured. We are clear for now. Lyra seemed relieved, but only slightly. Ethan, she said, your instincts have kept us safe so far. The faint tremor in her voice softened. But I need to tell you something else. The people who are after me, they do not stop. They follow logic, not emotion. Ethan slid the scanner into his pack and sat beside her, though with enough space to give her comfort. Then we stay ahead of their logic. Lyra offered a small, almost grateful smile. The soft hum of distant air vents filled the silence around them. A few moments passed before she spoke again. There is another reason they want me, she admitted. I accessed something I was never supposed to see. A file that revealed a risk to many worlds, not just mine. Ethan's attention sharpened. What kind of risk? She shook her head gently. I do not fully understand it. I only know that the information could prevent something harmful, but only if I reach someone who will listen. Ethan leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. You will. I will get you there. Lyra turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the dim light with quiet sincerity. You do not owe me this. Maybe not, Ethan replied. But leaving you alone in this would not feel right. A faint vibration traveled through the floor then, subtle enough that it could have been shifting metal somewhere in the old transit system. Ethan and Lyra both felt it. Both looked toward the darker end of the station. Not fear, not panic, just awareness. Ethan rose slowly, offering his hand to Lyra. We should keep moving. She placed her hand in his, steady and trusting. Yes, she said softly. Let us go. They stepped forward together into the dim passage, shadows stretching long behind them as the station faded into silence once more. The passage narrowed as Ethan Cole and Lyra moved deeper into the dim service corridor branching off the old transit station. The ceiling dipped lower here, lined with rusted pipes that hummed faintly, as if remembering a time when the system still carried power. Lyra kept close, her steps steady but cautious, her silver-flecked eyes taking in every detail as if she could read sound through the walls themselves. A soft draft blew from ahead, carrying the scent of old machinery and cold concrete. Ethan paused at an intersection where two corridors met, lifting his hand slightly to signal Lyra to wait. His visor's faint glow mapped the angles, offering a rough outline of the paths. One route sloped downward, deeper underground. The other curved toward what might have been an old maintenance hub. Which way will keep us off their grid? Ethan asked quietly. Lyra closed her eyes for a brief moment, fingertips brushing the wall beside her. The left path descends toward the geothermal ducts, she murmured. They distort tracking signals. It will make it harder for anyone to map our movements. Ethan gave a small nod. Left it is. They started down the sloped corridor, their footsteps softened by a thin layer of dust. The deeper they went, the more the walls changed. Smooth concrete gave way to reinforced alloy panels engraved with maintenance codes in faded paint. Lyra traced one of the markings with her hand, her expression thoughtful. These systems are older than your current technology, she said. They must have been built during your city's early expansion cycle. Ethan glanced at her with mild surprise. You can read that. Not the language, she replied, but the structure. My people use similar engineering for underground climate systems. It was one of the first moments she sounded relaxed, even curious. The tension in her shoulders eased, and the dim light softened across her turquoise skin. As they moved forward, a low hum grew louder, pulsing gently through the metal floor beneath them. The geothermal ducts. Ethan breathed in the warmer air drifting up from below, feeling the steadiness of the temperature shift. Safe territory, at least for now. A wide chamber opened ahead, filled with tall columns venting gentle waves of heated air. The columns glowed faintly amber, casting long shadows across the grated floor. Lyra stepped forward, her features softening. This will help hide us, she said. The ducts create too many temperature variations for sensors to track clearly. Ethan checked his handheld scanner again. The display flickered, distorted by the interference. Looks like you are right, he said. No one is finding us easily down here. Lyra studied him for a moment. Ethan, I know I have not earned your trust. I want to, but I know my presence has made everything harder for you. He leaned against a rail, arms crossed loosely. Helping someone is not supposed to be easy. Her eyes held a quiet depth. Even when that person brings danger with them? Especially then, Ethan replied. That is when it matters. She lowered her gaze, not in shame, but in thought, as if considering an idea she never allowed herself to believe. The geothermal chamber filled with a steady rhythmic thrum, calming in its consistency, almost like the heartbeat of the underground. Lyra placed a hand over one of the warm vents. We will not be able to stay long, she said. When the airflows cycle, the ducts will open again. If anyone is close, they may detect the shift. Ethan straightened. Then we use the time we have. We rest, gather our thoughts, and move again before the cycle ends. Lyra met his eyes, and for the first time since he found her, she looked grounded instead of on the edge of fear. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing to stay. Ethan offered a small, steady smile. I am here, Lyra, for as long as you need someone beside you. The chamber hummed around them, warm air drifting upward as they stood together in the quiet, the danger still out there, but held at bay for just a moment longer. The warm air rising through the geothermal chamber drifted in soft waves, carrying a steady hum that wrapped the space in a calm rhythm. Ethan Cole adjusted the strap of his pack and watched the dim amber glow reflect along the grated floor. Lyra stood near one of the vents, her turquoise skin catching the light in shifting shades, her eyes thoughtful as she traced a small pattern on the metal railing with her fingertips. For the first time since he had found her at the edge of the forest, there was no immediate urgency in her posture, just a quiet stillness. "How long until the cycle ends?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice low so it blended with the natural hum around them. Lyra considered the vents, listening in that precise way she had. "I estimate 20 minutes, she said. "After that, the ducts will begin redirecting airflow. It may draw attention if anyone is tracking larger environmental shifts nearby." Ethan nodded and moved closer, leaning against one of the warmer pillars. "Then we stay sharp." Lyra turned toward him, her expression carrying a mixture of gratitude and something unspoken. "I know I have said this before," she began, "but you are taking a risk by staying with me." Ethan gave a slight shrug. "I do not make a habit of leaving people behind." She studied him for a long moment, as though trying to understand how someone could choose loyalty so easily. "Where I come from," she said softly, "help is usually given with conditions. There is always something asked in return." Ethan's answer was simple. "Not this time." A faint warmth touched her features, almost a smile, before her gaze shifted upward to the ceiling where the amber light flickered. "I hope I can explain everything soon," she murmured. "But I do not want to tell you the wrong thing before I understand it myself." Ethan respected that. He had lived long enough to know that rushing someone's trust never worked the way you hoped. "Whenever you are ready," he said. They stood quietly for a few moments, letting the warm air drift between them. Ethan listened to the steady thrum beneath their feet, letting it ground him. The world above might have been unpredictable, but down here, at least for now, the environment felt honest. Lyra eventually stepped away from the vent and approached him, her footsteps soft, her expression more settled than before. "I can sense something," she said. "Not danger, but movement in the distance. It feels like shifting machinery." Ethan straightened slightly. "From the ducts?" "No," she replied. "From somewhere above us. Something is adjusting. It might be nothing, but we should be ready." Ethan listened carefully, but all he heard was the low, constant hum. Still, Lyra's senses were sharper than his, and he trusted her instincts. "Then let us move before the cycle starts," he said. He lifted his pack and extended his hand to her again. She placed her hand in his without hesitation this time, her touch steady and warm. They crossed the chamber toward a narrow walkway that led deeper into the underground structure. The metal beneath their boots vibrated gently with the shifting air currents. As they stepped into the connecting corridor, Lyra glanced back at the amber glow behind them. "You know," she said quietly, "I did not expect anyone to help me. Not truly." Ethan met her gaze with a calm certainty. "Then we will call this your first surprise of the day." Lyra's eyes softened, reflecting the faint corridor lights like small silver stars. They continued onward into the dim passageway, their silhouettes stretching across the metal walls as the geothermal chamber faded behind them, leaving only the steady sound of their footsteps and the promise of whatever waited ahead. The corridor stretched ahead in a long metallic curve, its walls lined with conduit panels that hummed softly as Ethan Cole and Lyra moved through the dim light. The temperature shifted subtly as they walked, the warm air from the geothermal chamber fading into a cooler draft that carried the faint scent of mineral dust. Lyra stayed close beside him, her steps light and deliberate, her eyes tracking every flicker of shadow along the walls. Ethan kept his pace steady, listening to the way their footsteps echoed just slightly off-beat, a reminder that the tunnel widened and narrowed in unpredictable intervals. It was quiet here, but not empty. The silence felt layered, as if the structure itself held memories of long-forgotten activity. "Ethan," Lyra said softly, her voice just above a whisper, "there is something else I need to explain. You have asked very few questions, but you deserve answers." Ethan glanced at her, his expression calm. "You can tell me whatever you are ready to share." She hesitated as they approached a junction where the corridor dipped into a gradual slope. The overhead lights flickered as if reacting to her uncertainty. "Where I come from," she began. The council members oversee all information flow. They filter what the public can see and what they cannot. I discovered something they removed from the archives. Something about the energy systems that sustain several worlds. Ethan slowed slightly. Removed why? Lyra's eyes flickered with the faint silver glow that intensified with strong emotion. Because the systems are unstable, she said. They could fail. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. And the council does not want anyone to know until they have solved it. They fear panic. Ethan absorbed that silently. The slope leveled out into a wider chamber where the air felt cooler, as if circulating from vents hidden in the walls. He guided her toward the center of the room, where the floor panels looked sturdier. So you tried to warn people, he said. And they wanted to stop you. Lyra nodded. I contacted someone outside the council. Someone who promised to help me share the truth safely. But someone discovered my communication before it reached them. Her voice softened. That is when they sent the hunters. Ethan positioned himself where he could see both entrances to the chamber. They said you carried information, he recalled. It seems they were right. Lyra wrapped her arms lightly around herself, not in fear, but in thought. I only wanted to help. I did not think it would lead to this. Ethan gave her a steady look. Trying to help is not something to regret. She tilted, her head slightly, as if unfamiliar with being told such things. Before she could respond, a soft vibration shivered through the floor, subtle but clear. Ethan glanced up at the support beams overhead. Shifting airflow. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, listening with senses sharper than his. No, she whispered. Something above us changed directions. It feels like a recalibration. Someone might be trying to track environmental variations. Ethan straightened. Then we move again. Lyra stepped closer, her expression earnest. You have stayed with me longer than anyone ever has. But I need to ask you something important before we continue. Ethan waited, his attention focused on her. If the council finds us, she said quietly, they will ask you to step aside. They will tell you that I am the one who caused this danger. They may even make you believe that helping me is a mistake. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. I know what I have seen. You are not a mistake. Lyra drew a slow breath, her eyes brightening with a quiet emotion that softened her features. Then let us keep going, she whispered. They turned toward the far corridor that stretched into the dim distance, walking side by side, as the hum of the structure followed them like a distant heartbeat. The corridor narrowed again, guiding Ethan Cole and Lyra into a deeper section of the underground network where the air felt cooler and the walls carried a faint, rhythmic pulse from somewhere far below. The hum was different here, softer and almost patterned, as if the structure itself was breathing. Lyra paused to listen, her head tilting slightly as her silver-flecked eyes followed the vibrations along the metal panels. This place is older than the rest, she murmured. I can feel the shift in the airflow. It is quieter, but more controlled. Ethan stepped ahead to scan the junction that opened before them, a wide hexagonal space supported by thick metal beams. The lighting was dim, but patches of soft blue illumination reflected off the floor, casting long shadows behind them. Looks stable, Ethan said, though he stayed alert. Lyra approached the center of the space where the blue light pooled, her presence gentle and attentive. The glow reflected off her skin in soft turquoise shades, giving her an almost serene aura. She knelt beside one of the illuminated panels, brushing her fingertips across its smooth surface. The panel pulsed faintly in response, as if recognizing a familiar energy. Ethan watched closely. What is that? She hesitated before answering. A relay node, she said quietly. My people use similar technology. It transmits low-level environmental data to central monitoring systems. Ethan's posture stiffened. Does that mean someone could track us through this? Lyra shook her head slowly. Only if it were active. But this one seems disconnected. The pulse is residual, like a fading memory. She stood, her expression shifting into something Ethan had not seen before, a quiet ache, tinged with responsibility. Ethan, she said softly, this is why I ran. These systems were designed to warn us of instability, but the council began shutting them down. They said the warnings were flawed. They said they were unnecessary. She took a breath, steady but pained. I found records showing the warnings were accurate. Entire energy grids could fail if the systems continue to degrade. Not today, but eventually. The consequences could reach far beyond my home. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. And when you tried to tell someone, they silenced you. Lyra met his gaze, her expression open and vulnerable. Yes, they told the hunters that I was dangerous, that I carried information that could cause unrest. The faint blue light flickered across her features, revealing the strain she had carried alone. I never meant to threaten anyone. I only wanted to protect the people who trusted the council. Ethan's voice was calm but firm. You did the right thing. Lyra's breath caught, as if hearing those words felt unfamiliar. She moved closer, her steps slow, her eyes searching his. Ethan, she whispered, I need to tell you something before we continue. You should know it now, not later. Ethan waited, alert but patient. Lyra placed her hand gently over the relay node's surface, letting the blue light illuminate her face. The hunters, she said softly. They were not only sent to stop me. They were sent to retrieve who I contacted. Ethan's heart tightened. You mean the person you trusted? She nodded. They never reached them. Someone intercepted the message. Someone who saw your name. Ethan felt the air shift around them, not from the ducks, but from the weight of realization. My name. Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling just enough to reveal her fear. Ethan, they did not come after me first. They came after you. And when they did not find you, they followed me instead. The hum of the relay panel dimmed slowly, leaving the chamber in a quiet stillness that felt heavier than before. The quiet in the relay chamber deepened after Lyra's confession, settling around Ethan Cole like a weight he could feel in his chest. The faint blue light from the inactive node pulsed once more, dim and slow, as if echoing the truth she had finally spoken aloud. Ethan stood perfectly still, letting the realization spread through him with the same steady pace as the hum beneath their feet. They were looking for me, he said quietly, more a confirmation than a question. Lyra stepped closer, her expression drawn with regret. I did not know at first. I only saw the redirected signal after I fled. They traced the communication to your identification, and when the message did not reach you, they targeted me to uncover who else might have it. Ethan took a slow breath, grounding himself. The air tasted faintly metallic here, warmed just enough by the ducks far below to carry a comfortable softness. So everything that happened in the forest, he continued. Their chase, your distress call, it all began because someone tried to intercept a message meant for me. Lyra lowered her eyes. I never meant to pull you into this. I only wanted someone who would listen, someone who was not bound to the council's influence. Ethan studied her, not with anger, but with a measured calm. And how did you know I would listen? She hesitated. Because the contact who recommended you said you had done something similar before. They said you stood up for a community on one of the outer colonies when their leadership tried to hide structural instability in their shelters. Ethan remembered that. The dust storms. The failing supports. The officials who hoped the storm season would pass without anyone noticing. That was a long time ago, he said softly. Lyra lifted her gaze. But you did not walk away then, even when it placed you at risk. That is why I sent the message to you. Her voice softened. I believed you would understand. Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders ease just slightly. He stepped closer to the relay node, looking down at the faint glow along its surface. And the hunters? He asked. What did they want with me? Lyra swallowed gently. To question you. To learn who else you might have been working with. Your name on the intercepted communication made them think you were already involved. When they could not find you quickly, they assumed I would lead them to the rest of the truth. Ethan let out a slow exhale. The truth was complex, layered, tangled with consequences neither of them had foreseen. Lyra, he said quietly, you should have told me sooner. Her voice trembled with sincerity. I was afraid, not of you, but of losing the only person who believed me without being forced to. Ethan closed the small distance between them, his tone steady. I am still here. Lyra's expression softened with quiet relief, the glow from the node reflecting in her silver-flecked eyes like fragments of starlight. Before either of them could speak again, a low shift resonated through the metal beams overhead, almost like a sigh from the structure itself. Lyra listened, her posture tightening. The air ducts above us are adjusting, she whispered. Someone might be monitoring changes again. Ethan lifted his pack and offered his hand to her in one smooth gesture. Then we move. Together. Lyra placed her hand in his, firm and sure. As they stepped away from the dim blue glow of the relay chamber, and moved into the next corridor. The soft echo of their footsteps merged with the quiet hum of the underground, carrying them forward into whatever truth waited ahead. The corridor ahead tapered into a gentle curve, washed in a muted glow from thin strips of aging lights that flickered, as if trying to remember how bright they once were. Ethan, Cole, and Lyra moved in unison now, not out of urgency alone, but out of an unspoken agreement that neither would take another step without the other. The hum of the underground shifted around them, a low, steady vibration that felt almost like a heartbeat pulsing through the metal walls. Lyra's hand remained lightly in Ethan's, her touch steady and warm, grounding him in the otherwise cool, echoing space. As they rounded the curve, the corridor opened into a tall chamber with a domed ceiling patterned with old reinforcement plates. The air here felt different, clearer, touched by a faint current that suggested a passage upward. Ethan slowed. "This might lead us back to the surface," he said, scanning the ceiling for ventilation outlines. Lyra lifted her gaze, her silver-flecked eyes shimmering softly. "I can sense open air above us. Not directly, but close." Ethan stepped into the chamber, listening to the subtle shift in the airflow. It was gentle, almost reassuring. He took a moment to breathe it in. Lyra watched him, her expression thoughtful. "You did not ask what you were supposed to do when the hunters reached you," she said quietly. "You did not ask what they wanted." Ethan looked at her, calm and steady. "I figured you would tell me when you were ready." Lyra's shoulders eased. "They wanted your cooperation. They believed you knew more than you did, simply because my message carried your identification. I am sorry for that." Ethan shook his head. "Do not apologize for someone else's choices." She stepped closer, her voice softer. "Still, you risked everything without knowing why." Ethan gave a small, genuine smile. "Maybe that says something about me. Or maybe it says something about you." Lyra held his gaze, her breath catching slightly, as if the words settled somewhere she had long kept guarded. She looked toward the far end of the chamber where a single service ladder extended upward, illuminated by a narrow column of light that filtered down from an unseen opening above. "That is our path," she said. "It will bring us near the outer edge of the city." Ethan tested the first rung, finding it solid enough. He turned to her and offered his hand. "Ready?" Lyra hesitated only long enough to take in the space around them. The chamber that had held so many echoes of the truth she had carried alone for far too long. Then she placed her hand in his, her fingers curling with quiet trust. "Yes," she whispered. "I am ready." They climbed together, the ladder cool beneath their hands, the narrow shaft filled with the soft sound of their breaths and the fading hum of the underground below. The higher they climbed, the brighter the light grew, warm and true, carrying the scent of open air and distant vegetation. Lyra paused on one rung, turning her head slightly toward Ethan. "You know," she said gently, "when I ran, I expected to face the rest of this alone." Ethan met her gaze. "You are not alone anymore." Her eyes softened, reflecting the brightening light above them. "Thank you, Ethan." They reached the top of the shaft, where a circular hatch waited. Ethan pushed it open, revealing the evening sky stretching across a quiet overlook outside the city. Soft hues of gold and blue mingled at the horizon, casting gentle light over the distant rooftops. Lyra stepped out beside him, the breeze brushing across her turquoise skin as she looked toward the vast expanse ahead. It was the first open sky she had seen since fleeing, and something in her posture shifted, relief, hope, and the fragile beginning of a future she might finally choose for herself. Ethan stood beside her in silence, letting the moment settle. The distant hum of the city blended with the whisper of the wind, forming a calm that neither had felt in a long while. Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but certain. "Whatever comes next, I want to face it the right way. I want to finish what I started. Not running, but standing for the truth." Ethan nodded. "Then we will face it together." She turned to him with a look full of gratitude and something deeper, something quiet and steady, like the first star appearing in the evening sky. And in that stillness, with the city below and the open world ahead, they began the next step. Not as fugitives, but as two people choosing to carry the truth forward, side by side.